Okay, I'm going to call this March 20th meeting of the City of Santa Cruz Planning Commission to order. If we could have a roll call vote, or a roll call, sorry.
Commissioner Kelly.
Present.
Kennedy. Gordon.
Present.
Dan.
Here.
McKelvey.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Chair Paul Hamus.
Here, and Commissioner Kennedy is absent with notice tonight. Are there any statements of disqualification for any members of the Planning Commission on the two items tonight? Seeing none, we will move to oral communications. Oral communications is a time for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items that are not on tonight's agenda and are within the scope of the Planning Commission's charge. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on anything to the Planning Commission tonight? Seeing none, we will move to approval of the minutes. There are two sets of minutes, one for the meeting from February 6th and one from the meeting of February 20th.
I'll move approval.
All right, motion by Commissioner Dan. Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner McKelvey. Any discussion? Okay, this is one where I think we can just say aye. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Let's move to consent public hearings. On tonight's consent agenda is 419 Palm Street. The permit number is CP24-0103. And is there anybody that would like to pull this item, or is there any discussion from commissioners? Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll move approval.
All right, motion by Commissioner.
Excuse me, Chair. You might want to check to see if there's anybody from the public who would like to speak on this item.
Oh, it is a public hearing. Yes, my fault. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on 419 Palm Street? Okay, seeing none. Now we will entertain a motion.
Now I will move.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Dan. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, seconded by Commissioner Gordon. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Kelly.
Approved.
Gordon.
Approved.
Dan.
Yes.
McKelvey.
Aye.
Thompson.
Approve.
Chair Paul Hamus.
Yes, that passes unanimously. Okay, we will move on to the public hearing, and we have 831 Almar Avenue on our docket tonight, and that is CP24-0136, and this is a hearing for a planned development permit pursuant to the City of Santa Cruz Municipal Code Section 24.08.740 for a variety of permits and residential units in the industrial zone on the west side. So I think we'll have a staff report.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Tim Mayer. I'm the Senior Planner with the City. This evening's public hearing item is an early consideration of an application for a planned development permit related to the proposed redevelopment of industrial land at 831 Almar Avenue. Illustrated here is the site plan, a subject site bordered in yellow. The site is an approximately 1.97 acre lot located south of the intersection of Mission Street and Almar Avenue. It's surrounded by the Safeway Shopping Center to the north, the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission, or RTC corridor, which makes up the spine of the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail to the south, a currently vacant single-family zone lot recently entitled for affordable housing development to the east, and additional industrial buildings to the west. And the property is located approximately a 10th mile south of Mission Street and a roughly half mile north of the Pacific Ocean. This slide includes various photos depicting the existing conditions of the site. The project area is currently developed with mostly unoccupied industrial buildings and an ancillary office use comprising approximately 44,826 square feet of industrial space. Currently, vehicular access occurs through a drive aisle from Almar Avenue, as shown here on the upper left-hand side of the slide. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, the proposed project includes a requested early consideration of an application for a planned development permit regarding a proposal for a new 6-story, 227,180 square foot mixed-use industrial residential development with approximately 120 residential units, 13,455 square feet of industrial and commercial space, 95 parking stalls, new landscaping and associated site modifications. Renderings of the project concept are shown here. An early consideration as being presented before you tonight provides the Planning Commission with the opportunity to review the appropriateness of the project's concept and the proposed land use, and in particular, to contemplate and evaluate the proposed residential use for the project site. If the proposed development project is further pursued, it will require approval of a suite of entitlements, including a plan development permit, special use permit, a design permit, density bonus request, non-residential demolition authorization permit, coastal permit, and potentially others. The city's general plan discourages development of residential uses on land with a general plan designation of industrial, except for limited development of live-work units, which is further defined in the industrial land use policy, which was attached to the staff report and available online. That is, the general plan land use description states that live-work units are the only type of residential use allowable in lands identified as industrial, and even then that residential use is generally discouraged. The general plan land use map included on this slide shows the general plan land use designation of the subject site, which is shown here in red, as industrial and is situated in the context of the general plan land use designation of surrounding sites. On the slide here, yellow is residential use in the general plan, turquoise is industrial, purple is community commercial, and the orange and white hatched is mixed use medium density, which provides a residential density of 10 to 30 dwelling units per acre. As identified in the municipal code, the plan development permit process provides a mechanism for consideration of variation from uses specified in the zoning ordinance and can facilitate the pursuit of a mixed-use industrial residential project without live-work units as is proposed in this early consideration. The applicant has requested review of the project concept, again, as an early consideration, which provides the opportunity for the Planning Commission to review and make a recommendation to the City Council regarding the fundamental question: should a multifamily industrial residential mixed-use development incorporating a residential use without live-work units be supported on the subject site through an application for a plan development permit with the project as proposed and with the modifications recommended by staff. A plan development permit is a discretionary permit which allows the commission to consider the appropriateness of the requested land use and allows for consideration of the submitted scope of work and project design. The city's municipal code states that a plan development permit, or PD, is intended to accomplish several primary goals as listed on this slide. The first goal is to provide an administrative technique to foster development plans for eligible lands which serve public objectives more fully than development plans permitted under conventional zoning regulations. And the second overarching objective is to establish criteria for identifying those parcels of land in the city which are eligible for the special procedures available to applicants proposing creative development plans requiring special review and approval procedures. The municipal code includes 5 criteria of eligibility for a plan development permit, which must be addressed by the project. Among others, the public interest in achieving goals stated in the general plan must be served more fully through the plan development process than through the application of conventional zoning regulations. The municipal code also includes findings required to be made for approval of a plan development permit or PD, including that the PD is consistent with the general plan, the local coastal land use plan, and adopted area plans, that it's consistent with the purpose of applicable sections of the zoning ordinance, that it includes planned variations to underlying district regulations which serve public purposes to an equivalent or higher degree than would underlying district regulations, that it can be coordinated with existing and proposed development in surrounding areas, and overall the amenity level of the development and the amount of open space shall be greater than what would have been permitted by the underlying district regulations. As shown on this slide are the existing and proposed site plans. The existing site plan on the left illustrates the arrangement of the existing buildings on the property. The proposed site plan on the right shows the project design as currently proposed. The site layout places the 6-story mixed-use industrial residential building at the north part of the parcel, a central drive aisle in the middle, shown here in gray, and a standalone 2-story, approximately 5,000 square foot building at the southwest corner of the lot. A triangular shaped area of open space, as shown here, would extend forward of the 2-story building, and a large wall or barrier, as shown here where my cursor is, would separate the drive aisle and the open space from the adjacent rail corridor to the south. This slide shows the proposed first and second story floor plans. Here, industrial/commercial space is shown in red, bicycle parking is shown in green, parking and storage areas are shown in medium gray, which takes up a good portion of the ground floor here. Supportive elements such as electrical and storage rooms are shown in dark gray, as indicated here, trash and electrical, for example. And residential units are shown in blue, as appears here on the second floor plan and above. Through review of the pre-application and the formal application for the project, several concerns have been identified regarding key elements of the project scope and design. Number one, perhaps most importantly, the requirement for preservation of employment capacity remains a prevailing value as established in the city's general plan and the supporting documents. The proposed project would result in a loss of approximately 31,371 net square feet of industrial land capacity as a difference between the industrial building area demolished and the new industrial commercial area proposed. Such a loss of industrial building area has the potential to reduce employment within city limits, which employment finances city services, reduces long distance commuting, as well as associated loss of productivity and environmental and quality of life impacts, and promotes long-term vitality of the city. The project's interface with the public right-of-way along Almar Avenue here, shown on the easterly side of the site, lacks certain design features which encourage active use. Also, a third element, the design of the wall or barrier along the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission, RTC rail trail corridor, obstructs the visibility and interaction with adjacent Monterey Bay Sanctuary scenic trail areas. A fourth element is the entire areas and elements of the proposed design lack conformance to the city's objective design standards for multifamily development. And the project generally lacks spaces offering residential and industrial commercial amenities, which are appropriate for the proposed scope of work, which requires a plan development permit. While provision of public benefits beyond standards required by the municipal code are required as part of the PD process. Consistent with the city's public outreach policy for planning projects, a community engagement meeting was held on November 4th of 2024. Approximately 68 members of the public attended, and participants offered a diversity of feedback ranging from concerns about the loss of available on-street parking capacity to expectations for worsened neighborhood traffic, loss of walkability. Also stressed the importance of the housing of UC Santa Cruz students on the UCSC campus, to loss of industrial and therefore employment capacity. Attendees offered suggestions for project improvement, including enhanced articulation, integration of traffic calming measures, inclusion of a childcare facility in the project, and also integration of project features for management of migrating shopping carts and deterrence of skateboarding, among others. Overall, the attendee reactions could be characterized as ranging from moderate to significant concerns, particularly regarding impacts to the existing surrounding residential uses, although some participants expressed support for the project. In response to the concerns raised by staff related to the project design, staff have recommended certain revisions to the project. An attachment has been provided with a staff report and also available online, which includes staff recommended floor plan changes, including, again, suggested modifications to help resolve some of the concerns I highlighted earlier. Suggested revisions are shown in purple text here and are repeated again in that attachment provided in the staff report. The text may be a bit difficult to read due to the size of the plans, and I'll kind of walk through the suggested revisions. One of the suggested revisions is that the industrial/commercial tenant spaces should be placed at the project's public frontage along Almar Avenue here, built to a minimum depth of at least 25 feet on the ground floor with exceptions to that depth allowed for areas for building ingress, egress, and access to parking or loading areas. Also with flexibility and depth accommodated to second floor industrial spaces. So again, the suggestion that additional industrial space be provided, particularly on the ground floor, as shown here along the frontage with Almar Avenue, and also where possible on the second floor. The project site is located within a half mile of one or more major transit stops and is subject to California Assembly Bill 2097, which exempts the project from the provision of vehicular parking. Some of the areas proposed to be dedicated to parking capacity could instead be dedicated to industrial space. So again, the ground floor here, the area shown in gray is essentially all parking, and parts of those areas could conceivably be used for expansion of industrial space. Also, the proposed electrical room, as shown here on the slide where I'm circling, should be relocated to a position other than along the property frontage. Also, if live-work units are proposed, they're not currently, they should be designed consistent with the objective standards for live-work units in the commercial zone districts provided in the municipal code. Also, the design of the standalone building shown over here, this standalone industrial commercial building, again, proposed at the southwest corner of the parcel, could be modified to include greater industrial and therefore employment capacity. For example, the number of stories could be increased, or one or both of the floors could be enlarged to enclose additional floor area. And if envisioned for potential occupancy by a commercial tenant, outdoor seating areas could be incorporated in the triangular areas I'm circling here, south of proposed access drive aisle, in order to activate the project's interface with the adjacent rail trail and increase the jobs generating potential. Also, the amount of project area designated as storage, which are shown kind of in these rectangular portions in kind of medium gray here, could be reduced and replaced to offset the loss of industrial square footage that's included as part of the project. And particularly as one instance, the plans could be revised to consolidate the groupings of residential space here, replacing those with storage spaces, replacing those with industrial commercial space. So for example, on the second floor, units 25, 26, and 27 that I'm circling here could be relocated next to residential unit number 14 shown here, with this space currently occupied by the residential units, replaced with industrial commercial square footage or live workspaces. Alternatively, bike parking, which is shown on the first floor over here, could be made into commercial industrial space here and here, and could be potentially relocated to the second story with space number 24 instead of used for bike parking. So again, the idea is that the areas that are particularly on the ground floor dedicated to non-industrial space could be expanded to include additional industrial commercial space. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the wall or barrier proposed to be located along the southerly property line could be deleted for activation of the property's frontage, facilitating greater connectivity of the rail trail for access by potential clientele from the adjacent right-of-way, improved visibility and prominence of the buildings and enhanced project design. And one thing to note is the RTC is currently pursuing electrified rail service on this existing rail line. And the Coastal Rail Trail System, recently entitled, will place a combined bicycle and pedestrian path adjacent to the existing freight tracks, providing future opportunities for activation of the development's frontage along the rail trail corridor. So in response to the early consideration of the requested plan development permit, the Planning Commission may recommend one of several options as described on the slide. Option number one is that the Planning Commission could recommend that the City Council direct the applicant to proceed with the requested plan development permit. Should this be the Planning Commission's recommendation, staff would recommend that the Planning Commission incorporate the recommended revisions to the project scope and design as discussed and identify in the staff report. Option number two, the Planning Commission could recommend that the City Council direct the applicant to pursue a general plan amendment, rezoning, and local coastal plan amendment to allow for further consideration of the proposed project. Option number 3 is that the Planning Commission could recommend that the City Council deny the project with or without prejudice. Option number 4, the Planning Commission could recommend that the City Council defer judgment of the proposed project to a later date after more information has been provided. It is recommended that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council option 1 of the 4 options. That is, staff recommend that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council direct further pursuit of the plan development permit with staff recommendations for further refinement of the site and building design, as mentioned earlier and as described in the staff report, and further specified in the staff recommended floor plan changes document provided. Staff and the applicant are available to answer questions, and thank you very much. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you so much. Okay, questions for staff from commissioners? Commissioner McKelvey.
Is there a presentation coming from the applicant at all?
I believe that the applicant would like to present some remarks.
Any other questions for staff from commissioners?
Can we wait till after the applicant's
Sure
presentation?
can, yes. So yeah, let's have the applicant come up and give what I presume to be will be a presentation.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Primack. I'm the representative of the owners, and there's a letter in your packet, but I think just for the sake of time, I'd just like to read that letter and then address a couple of small issues. I don't have a visual presentation for you. You've seen much of what has crossed the table so far. The longtime owners of this property and the planning department are asking you to encourage the city council to support the processing of a planned development application for this property at 831 Almar, the site of the former Famali Herb Company. We will be joining in that presentation, but it's important, and I'm sorry, I'm reading the letter I have, but I think it's important that we have some background on this. I want to talk to the current conditions. It has been a very long time since this property and its buildings were fully occupied. It was not for lack of trying. The straitjacket of this property is an anachronistic land use designation originating from both the site's proximity to a now abandoned freight line and former zoning approvals for a large single-use warehouse facility, now woefully lacking in infrastructure and access, seems to condemn the property to many more decades of underuse or dereliction. Having maintained their property through long periods of protracted vacancies and underutilization, the owners are now ready to transform the property to meet more pressing, viable, and proven community needs. Current environment. Overwhelmingly, those needs revolve around our lack of appropriate housing. In re-envisioning the site, we chose to address that challenge head on. As we all know, the city has for decades maintained a policy in support of acceptance of university efforts to house only half their students on campus. We are all aware that well over half the student population of Santa Cruz has no on-campus housing and will likely never have that housing. And we are personally aware of the degree to which student demand has destabilized our residential neighborhoods through both the very nature of their transient occupancy and in the resultant escalation of housing costs. For every 4 or 5 students seeking off-campus housing, one home in Santa Cruz becomes unavailable to locals. And so the concept of New Famali is a direct response to our present reality. For every 4 young people housed at New Famali, one single-family, Santa Cruz residential property can remain available for Santa Cruz family. We hope to house 300 people. So why a planned development? Today, the sheer quantity of new construction in Santa Cruz is testimony to the accumulated demand that had gone unanswered for so many years. That demand precipitated the SB 330 style state actions that eliminated discretionary controls at the local level. But it also resulted in a frustrated and often hostile relationship between local leaders, administrators, neighbors, and builders, with people on all sides digging in their heels. This has driven efforts at public consensus further away from the public and into the courts. But Santa Cruz is somewhat unique among California's cities in that it has a long-standing planned development ordinance which, though discretionary, allows for a project on this site that can meet or exceed the limited benefits of ordinary zoning. Clearly, our most innovative projects of the last few decades have all been planned developments. It's the one aspect of our local zoning culture that can honestly dispel the stereotype of cities as necessarily reactive and conservative. Mixed use, work-live, co-housing all emerged and thrived here first through the PD process. None would have seen the light of day if confined to the straitjacket of standard zoning. We know that because we have tested those waters. The New Famale project began as yet one more SB 330 application, and planning staff's response was guarded and conservative, a natural response to the rush of new state mandates. Rather than continue down that contentious and compromising path, you know, that adage about doing the same thing over and over again, always hoping for a different result, we and the planning director agreed that if the owners were willing to trust a discretionary process, trust staff, commission, council, and residents to rise above the current siege mentality and appreciate this project on its own merits and for its own potential, then we might actually create a new model for cooperation and creativity. The New Famale we wish to present through the PD process will support more jobs than the current building ever did. Jobs in R&D, food services, tech, and retail. And just as importantly, the next generation of Santa Cruz workers and students will have a vibrant, secure residential community that supports environmental principles, smart growth, livable streets, while activating our rail trail, patronizing local businesses, and enjoying smart transportation options. So this is our request. Discretion represents a big risk for the owner. But if staff, the Planning Commission, and the City Council is willing to consider a project that will bring more jobs to the site than the previous buildings, in far less square footage, will both activate the rail trail and enhance it with an adjacent commercial activities and house young people. And this is not, we're not proposing this as university housing. This is housing for young people, whether they're Cabrillo students, UC students, or whether they're driving over the hill, living at home, driving over the hill to San Jose State. This is housing primarily for young people. We are asking you to recommend that the City Council direct staff to process a plan development application, which we will outline for you at the meeting. Now, staff has enumerated a number of revisions and questions that they had regarding the SB 3330 application we had. I'd like to point out that under plan development, we are happy to work with staff, work with planners to look at the street as it is and the streetscape it is. And we all know that there has never been a sidewalk on the other side of Almar from this property. So we're starting more or less from scratch here with the opportunity to create a streetscape and a pedestrian pathway that could really serve this community. It doesn't exist right now. And I'd also like to say, that, the SB 330 came forward to prevent cities from using subjective means of denying projects. And nothing could have been more subjective than the call that 40,000 square feet of warehouse needed to be replaced in another, in a future project. Because 40,000 square feet of warehouse represents 40 jobs. And with the type of workplaces that we're talking about creating here, we will more than double or triple that on site. So it's not about square footage, it's about the type of jobs that we can create there. And right now we show a pedestrian way, an activated pedestrian zone with commercial uses that lies adjacent to the rail trail that can serve the rail trail. And right now, on the other side of the property line is what might be called a seasonal wetland on the other side of the tracks. It's not, this site is not accessible to the rail trail other than along Almar. Hopefully that will change, and hopefully we will have a design that can accommodate that change and take advantage of a rail trail that's fully improved that this site can continue to support. So that's pretty much what we wish to ask for tonight, that you let us get on with a community process, a discretionary process that engages all of you in a discussion about the highest and best use of this site. Thank you. I'm available for questions if you have.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to go a little out of order. I think we're going to return commission questions for staff and then possibly for you as well. Any questions for staff?
I have a question. So there was an SB 330 application for this project. Can you talk about how that intersects with this planned unit development proposal? And how would an SB 330 project that consists of this project that we have before us, mostly residential, be processed with the underlying zoning? I just can't, I don't understand that connection.
Sure. Thanks, Commissioner Dan. I can try to explain that. So when the project was first brought before staff, we weren't entirely sure what entitlement pathway would be undertaken. And so it's pretty standard for large-scale development projects to submit a pre-application under SB 330 to vest the project, meaning like lock into place the local regulations in place at the time of the pre-application submitted. So it's what we see in most large projects these days. As the project unfolded and we had additional conversations following the completeness of the SB 330 pre-application, staff had met pretty extensively with, corresponded pretty extensively with the applicant about potential pathways. And as we discussed further, this notion of an early consideration was brought to light, and that being part of a step in the plan development permit process. And so as you mentioned, the interaction between state laws is not always totally clear. So we did kind of some digging in consultation with the city attorney's office. And typically an SB 330 pre-application, again, is intended to kind of lock into place those regulations time of pre-app submittal. We actually have found that based on consultation with the city attorney's office that pre-application process probably doesn't pertain to a planned development permit. So there is discretion still provided through the planned development permit process for the project, unlike like a non-PD. So we found that the variances in PDs would be not necessarily subject to SB 330.
Okay, so just so I can be clear, so an SB 330 process that we're very familiar with now, are you saying that that's not an option for this project because of the zoning? That's what I'm trying to understand. Is that still an option for them?
Well, so through the plan development, so basically the plan development permit it's a mechanism to consider, in this case, a use that wasn't envisioned by the zoning ordinance and also the general plan. So it's the mechanism.
I understand that part.
Right, okay.
I'm trying to understand
so,
what their various, is this their only path? I mean, aside from rezoning and all that.
Right.
Or can they go through the SB 330 process? And I really just don't know. I'm really just asking.
So they started with SB 330, and because what's being proposed is, again, it's a residential use that doesn't involve live work units. And so it's not that residential use without the live work units was not anticipated in the general plan. So it's outside the general plan land use description.
So we can just say we don't know, or this is a legal question we haven't answered yet. Is that what I'm understanding? It's okay.
I can jump in there. So SB 330 would lock in a project that is conforming to objective standards, including the general plan and the zoning ordinance. Since this one deviates from those uses, it would no longer be locked in.
Okay, thank you. Got it. Thanks.
Commissioner Gordon.
So then some of what we were reading was the original, in terms of the plan description and the plans that were submitted. were those just holdovers from the SB 330 in terms of concessions, potential concessions that they were asking for or might ask for? Was that all in relationship to that original application?
Well, so this is the project applicants invoking state density bonus law. So the request of waivers and incentive concessions would remain as part of the project. So they can be, through the PD process, the applicant can still use.
Okay, so it's related to the density
Correct.
and that is still applicable
Correct,
to
yes.
the PD process.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the project could still be amended at this point, if they wanted to come in with different incentives, concessions as they work on their design, that could still be changed when the final product comes in.
Can I just ask one? So,
Of course you can.
in terms of this design, I guess maybe this is directed to Mark, how much in process does your team feel like this is? Because there's been a lot of recommendations from the planning department. I guess one question is, does your team find any of those difficult to meet, or do you have any arguments against those? And secondly, how much does your team see this as an in-process design?
Well, I think it was useful for Tim to enumerate the recommendations from staff because we're leaving all that behind with the PD. You are more than familiar with the rigmarole of SB 30 applications that allow for conversion of storage space to accessory dwelling units, et cetera. And so you see these projects come through that say this is storage, and everybody knows it's, the applicant's not hiding it. They'll eventually be converted, but it's very confusing to the public. It's confusing to everybody. And so the discussion of work, live, et cetera, in those reports have to do with that SB 30 component of the original application. We're leaving that behind. We're creating housing. We're creating housing for young people. We want it to be affordable. Some years ago, somebody came to me who had bought a property in this neighborhood along the railroad tracks about 2 blocks towards Bay. He wanted to build a house. He asked me if I'd be interested. He came and he'd done a sketch. It was a house with a living room, a dining kitchen, and a double-loaded corridor and 6 bedrooms. And I said, "You're building a student dorm here?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm building a student dorm here." I said, "I'm not really interested, but in a project like this, we could have 6-bedroom apartments. We could have young people sharing, living affordably, and enjoying being in town." So those kinds of recommendations that came with the SB, as far as I'm concerned, they're out the window. This is a new ballgame, and we can be very upfront and honest about what we want to do and who we want to accommodate.
Okay, so I guess what I'm thank you. And what I'm trying to understand is that the planning department has some recommendations that they believe will make this project more in alignment with an approved PD project in this area. Does your team have any issues with any of those? And I'm trying to understand how much of, I'm trying to understand how granular I need to be in making comments about this, or is this like, are you going to go back to the drawing table with this?
Well, I think it's fair to look at the renderings of this project to see 2 stories along the tracks, to see 3 stories beyond that, 3 or 4 stories beyond that, and then the larger buildings backed up against the Safeway project, the general square footage, the general density. It's safe to say that's what the project's going to look like. Beyond that, we're looking forward to a discussion with staff of how we can make this the best project and how we can contribute to making this a very walkable and usable street as well.
Commissioner McKelvey.
Sorry, one more question. Just to follow up on what Commissioner Gordon is saying, my reactions to the renderings and the design, they have a lot to do with the comments that staff have made about kind of activating that street frontage. And when I see that garage door and those walls that are, creating the boundary of the parking, those are the things that I'm interested in talking about. Are those still things that are in flux?
Oh, yeah,
Or,
absolutely,
okay,
absolutely.
great.
Okay, any other questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, at this point, we're going to welcome members of the public to come up and speak on this item. Just a couple reminders on that. How many people wish to speak on this item here tonight? Can we just get a hand to get a sense of how many people are looking to? Okay, great. What I'm going to have everyone do is line up to my left or your right and come up one at a time. And if you want to sign in and use your name, that'd be great. That helps us with our minutes, but of course you don't have to do that. Secondly, on projects like this, we understand that planning and change within people's neighborhood can be an emotional thing. And we may disagree on individual projects, but what is important is to maintain decorum in our chamber and to have conversations that are respectful to one another. And ultimately, the higher philosophy, more than any one project, is people being able to address their government on what it's doing, right? And so please, no cheers, no jeers. That's what we say up here is, when people speak, you don't need to approve or disapprove. You can just think about what they say. And so we're going to encourage that strongly in here, okay? Please come on up. You'll have 2 minutes.
First of all, I didn't know if this was a council meeting or a planning commission meeting. So if I say council, I mean no disrespect. You all are in service of the community here. So my name is Kenny Imes. I live in the vicinity of this proposed project. I'm here to encourage you to act on behalf of your constituents rather than outside influences. Last spring, City Council, instead of providing much-needed live-work housing, supporting the community with jobs and services, approved the building of 2 large UC housing projects at Ingalls Alley. Now, with this even larger 831 Almar Avenue project, you're being asked to authorize building inconsistent with the general planned land use, specifically a huge 70-foot tall and approximately 300-foot wide eyesore of a housing complex to be built in the middle of our residential neighborhood. Like the Ingalls Alley project, this project will not support the community. As stated at the November 4th public outreach meeting, tonight's project is, quote, primarily for students, end quote. At that meeting, they also disclosed the project will have private 5th floor rooftop terraces with bay views, available only for these primarily student residents. UC has over 1,000 acres upon which to build ample student housing, much of it with amazing bay views. I can't believe you're even considering a primary student housing project that will take residents' privacy, views, parking, and job opportunities. Build student housing on campus. Yes, Workbench will miss out on an opportunity to generate internal rates of return above 25% for investors that they brag about on their website. But you will not alienate residents and lose the support of your tax base. Your hands are not tied by state law on this one. Simply deny the zoning change. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next, please. You'll have 2 minutes.
Thanks. My name is Nicole Della Santina. I'm third generation Santa Cruz. I went to high school and college here. I did not inherit a house or money to live here. My husband and I are both high school teachers. We bought a mobile home as our best housing option. We did this to build equity. 5 years later, we sold the mobile home and used that money to put a down payment on our dream home. After all of this new housing is rentals, meant to profit the developers at the expense of the renters. Renting traps people into throwing away money month after month. Ownership is the way to a healthy community, a community who shares their favorite repair person, tools. With ownership comes pride and a sense of belonging. Deny the Almar project, it's rentals, not what's healthy for our community needs. Why would you consider working with a group who is suing the city over their last proposal, the food bin? Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Next, please. You'll have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Abigail Folkart. I live just 2 blocks away from the proposed project. I would like to ask a rhetorical question. If anyone on the committee lives on the west side, anyone? The traffic on Mission Street is outrageous. I can't get across town from 2 p.m. on or back in the morning. It's ridiculous. And I don't feel that it's our responsibility to provide housing for UCSC students. The city's priority should be housing for families and low-income people who work at the gas stations and the restaurants and are commuting from Watsonville and beyond trying to get to work here. Putting a dorm for 300 college students 2 blocks from my house, I find unacceptable. In addition to putting a 6-story building, we're losing privacy and we're losing parking, and our neighborhood cannot handle 300 more cars on the road, especially on Mission Street and Delaware Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Welcome. Hello.
Hi, my name's Will Power. I would just say, echoing what the last 3 speakers said, it's enough people already. There's multiple projects in the works, and we don't know how that'll affect traffic on Mission Street, like she said. People profiteering who live somewhere else seems not quite right. I think the first speaker said it better than I can say it, but I feel the same way as the last 3 people who spoke. It's just really hard to drive around. I think maybe it would be sweet if we could wait and see how all the other projects that are 5 and 6 stories right in that same vicinity are going to affect us. You know, I'm looking at this one, it's 6 stories. So, you know, I know something's probably going to get built there. Maybe it could be 3 stories, or maybe it could be slightly smaller so it wouldn't affect us traffic-wise so much. So maybe just a matter of degree change. In my wildest dream, there would be nothing there. It would be a nice park or something for people to play. I don't know if that's possible or not. I don't know why we always have to be growing and expanding. I guess that's the nature of humanity. I'm not sure. But my dream would be less cars on the street, less people. I think everyone would echo me who lives in that vicinity. Maybe that's just greedy, but maybe you all can make it possible. And if you sign on for the 6-story project and it ends up being impossible to drive from one side of town to the next, we'll probably remember and vote you out, I guess, or something. I don't know how that works. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. You'll have 2 minutes.
My name is Renee. I live kitty corner at 820 Alma Avenue. I have a few questions. It was mentioned that there will be commercial activities. I am wondering if that would, how much noise that would create, how much toxic stuff would that create, and how much traffic that would create. Then my other question is that property has been used for heavy commercial stuff before, and I suspect that there's a bunch of pollution in the ground, like heavy metals. So how is that going to be cleaned up, and how are the residents protected when it's being built, so we don't have to, you know, inhale and deal with all the whatever there is, mercury, arsenic, and so forth. My other point is that more people means there's sort of a more pressure in the area because it's just simply more people. We don't want to encourage more cars. So what is the city doing to, you know, just create a better pedestrian and bicycle network, maybe some green spaces to make up for that? And then my last point is 6 stories just seem a little bit excessive and out of place. There's nothing like that. Our house is 2 stories high, and then we would have this huge, massive thing towering, and it just doesn't seem right. Maybe there's a way of reducing that a little bit. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi,
Welcome.
Chris Brady. I'm also a resident of the area. I just, it's getting a bit repetitive, but we just want to drive home the point about how out of character this is for our neighborhood. 6 stories is just a monolith out there. You can see it from all over the hillsides. It would be horrendous. Just that's where your eyes would go instead of to the beautiful ocean and landscape beyond that. Also, the impact of so many people and the parking issues is just completely a pipe dream, thinking that people are going to actually use the public transit and not own a car still. The parking issue still is an issue. You know, everybody, who here doesn't own a car? Who here took the bus tonight? Nobody. Is there any arms? I mean, one bicycle. It's okay, that's great. But everybody's going to have a car. They're all going to need to park it somewhere. There's so many people in this development that are going to have to put their cars somewhere. It's crazy for the impact of the neighborhood, for the Safeway, for everything. And then the points on Mission Street again. You know, if you've ever had to drive Mission Street on the weekend or at any commute hour, it's ridiculous. It takes 20 minutes at least, at a minimum, to get from one end to the other. It's crazy. We don't need to put another 2,000 cars in that time frame. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello,
Welcome.
I'm Catherine Isbister, and I also live really close to the property. And I guess, you guys probably live all over the Santa Cruz area, and I wanted to characterize how our neighborhood has slowly transformed. So a lot of the so-called industrial spaces are actually little businesses, like a little print shop or a little surfboard making place. They have a very local and nice character to them. And one of the things we were most horrified by that early plan that we saw before was just as I think John McKelvey said, this monolithic front against the sidewalk, which was completely out of character to how we see our neighborhood evolving. So I would just echo other residents in saying, thinking really well about that sidewalk area, thinking about businesses that make sense in the context of the neighborhood makes a lot of sense, and thinking about a smaller building makes a lot of sense. So, given the chance to let loose of zoning, I can see how that makes sense, but then I think you should really be sensitive to how the neighborhood is evolving and respect how that evolution is happening. And I think something like this would diminish the charm and character of the neighborhood. Yeah.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm Ellen Murtha. Thank you so much. I learned a lot tonight. And I'm normally a housing advocate. I am confused by the change from the SB 330 to now the planned development permit. I don't quite understand why they would still be getting 6 stories when it's not really a density bonus that goes with the earlier state requirement. So that would be my first request, is to really consider a lower level, 4 stories or something. Right across the street is a wonderful example of housing. It's going to be 3 stories, 55 years affordable, multi-bedroom for families, and a parking space for every unit. Those are wonderful things that the planning department approved. This one seems like trust the process, trust the developer to think of all the things that we want and need for our city. That's a pretty big request. And my biggest concern is the safety for pedestrians, especially children around Garfield Park. I know it's aspirational to not have parking spaces for the units and hope that they use public transit or bike, but that is really aspirational. I think we should have the developer pay for the traffic calming measures. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Lloyd Reber. I'm with the Carpenters 646. I'm not here to speak in favor or against the project, but I'm just here to ask that if you consider the project, you would consider requiring a responsible general contractor that cares about the community, gives back to the community in ways such as paying a livable wage, having medical and retirement benefits on the project, apprenticeship. It invests in our community, in young people of our community, as well as having a labor compliance aspect to the project, to where we can be sure that they are taking care of the community. So again, I'm with Carpenter 646, and I just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. My name is Eric Garcia. I live in the Lower West Side in the vicinity of the proposed project. And I would say I largely agree with most of the comments that I've heard from earlier commenters, and I have similar concerns. I fail to see how this project really benefits the community and really improves Santa Cruz. It was proposed as, I think there was some comment about work-live spaces. I've been a student in the past for many, many years. And I can tell you through all my years as a student, I didn't have that much time to do work, and I certainly wasn't employing other people. I may have had a part-time job, but it certainly wasn't adding jobs to the community. So I don't see how a housing development primarily for students creates more jobs. That's confusing to me. I also think that the design of the project is very inconsistent with the neighborhood. A 6-story building that close to what are mostly single-story or 2-story homes, single-family homes, seems, without any kind of buffer, seems very inappropriate. There's going to be a lot of invasion of privacy, blocked sun, blocked views, added traffic and added congestion. Already people do take a lot of side streets through the neighborhoods to avoid the overly congested Mission Street. So that's just going to be made worse by this scale of a project. I'm sure I could think of many other things that I don't like about this project, but those are the major ones, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Sir, I'm sorry, no repeat performances. Thank you. You can scream at us after the meeting like everybody else. Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Politelli. I also live in the area. And I agree with all of the comments that were made before. I want to echo those. And I want to bring up a couple more issues. One quick one is the building of more commercial space, and even living space is concerning to me when the Anton project downtown has remained empty since the pandemic or whenever they opened that. I don't see any businesses moving in there, so I don't think there's demand for that. Those apartments are also not full because the rents are, $5,000, $6,000, and the people that we want to house they can't afford it. So I am completely for affordable housing and workforce housing. That is what we need in this town. Anything else, I would ask, okay, so I understand that the city has very limited power based on the SB 330 and all of those things, right? I also think the city has an obligation to protect the health and safety of the residents, and you are for the people, right? So I believe that these types of out of control, massive, oversized developments are putting our residents at risk because we do not have the infrastructure to support all of these buildings. There's already enough being built downtown, and now I want to speak for this and also all the skyscraper nonsense business talking I've heard. This town, we all know it. Has anyone been to the ER lately? Okay. You're going to be in there for 24 hours. My 89-year-old mother was kept in the hallway in a storm for hours. We do not have the healthcare facilities. Is my time up?
You can take 15 seconds and sum it up.
We don't have PG&E. Anybody have power when there's a breeze? I don't have power. So it's water when there's a drought. It's all these things. The city must come, if you want to approve these things, please force a plan. I know you don't control PG&E in those days, but we cannot survive. We have no evacuation routes. We do not have the infrastructure. This is not the town to develop. Build somewhere else.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. Thanks for the time. My name is Rob Oliveros, lifetime resident of this county and city. Let's see. So basically, a number of different things. I attended one of the Zoom meetings, I believe, for this the first time around. And I brought up, as other people did, the traffic issues. And that's an ongoing thing here in Santa Cruz, no matter what. But basically, what I tried to bring up at that meeting, that Zoom meeting, was the fact that it was being dealt as if this was just a single project. You've got this, you've got the place across the street, you've got the place over by Starbucks, you've got a food bin, plus you have the monstrosity at the clock tower potentially. And it's, it's like, well, we're only considering this. No, you have to consider it as a whole. And from one of the previous meetings, basically what we were told was that Mission Street is Caltrans. And so basically nothing can be done to mitigate the traffic there because the state's got to get involved. That's number one. Number two, in terms of, it seems the SB 330 approach is a very, very heavy-handed approach. I've lived here long enough to remember the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a very concerted effort between the community and everyone who was involved in terms of trying to revitalize the downtown. And I would have you look at the Flatiron building where the bakery used to be, and now there's a Jamba Juice or what have you. That is a testament to what can be done if the city, which is you people, the community, and these people work hand in hand, as opposed to this. Basically, it's not congruent with what we've got going on. Now, understand, yes, there is change. But it has to be kind of taken into consideration with the place that we live in, which is a beautiful place unlike any other. We have a huge amount of tourism. Why? Because it is beautiful. And how are those tourists even going to get here once this starts getting built out like that? That is our lifeblood. It's been since day one. So please keep that in mind.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this item? Okay, we're going to close the public comment period. In the past, we've offered the applicant a chance to address the public. And if that's something you're interested in doing, then.
And they address us.
And us, yeah.
Just briefly, I've spent 16 hours in the ER with my 98-year-old mother-in-law, so I understand the need for services, and I understand how there's it's an uneven move of increasing population and increasing provisions for those needs. But I would like to talk about the street a little bit more. When we talk about a plan development, we talk about the community working together to come up with solutions. You start with a given. You start with a street that has a shopping center at the corner with 2 entry and exit drives, which are not pedestrian friendly, which are hazards for pedestrians. You have the parish pub, which has 0 setback from the street, which is immediately adjacent to this property. So I really do believe that we should be talking about how livable the street could become, and we need to look at the entire street, and we need to ask ourselves, where's the safest path of travel for people in the neighborhood to Mission Street? And we're more than happy to participate in that discussion and let the design of this project reflect those design parameters as they evolve. So we will have a frontage that reflects a very workable and a very successful pedestrian environment. I've no doubt that we can do that. I've only been involved in the conversation about, growth and for, 45 years here. So I don't know what to add to that conversation. But this project stemmed, my office was was on Swift Street, 2 blocks from this site for 25 years. I'm a West Side resident. I've lived on the West Side since 1976. I'm familiar with the area, and all I can say to you is this is my best assessment of how we make a livable city in Santa Cruz with what we've got, with the existing zoning, with the existing encumbrances we have, and the history, and the existing decisions, i.e., half the students live on campus, half the students live off campus, and all of our young people are struggling to get a foothold in Santa Cruz. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, we're going to return to the commission for any comments or questions of
I
staff.
have a question. And
Commissioner
I'll
or
direct
Vice
it
Chair
to
Dan.
Staff. I have a bunch of comments and suggestions later, but I did have a question still about the process and the paths. So earlier, Mr. Premack mentioned, that they're willing to take a risk to go through the PUD process and it's discretionary. And, I just really appreciate that. And it's like a throwback to ancient times to have discretion. But if it weren't for this PUD path, besides so the question is, if it weren't for the PUD path, is 2 the only other path for them? What's their other path to develop a residential project?
Right, yeah, so as you mentioned, Commissioner Dan, so the plan development permit process was selected because it allows for that, the use that's being proposed, residential, that's not live work in the general plan, land use designation or of industrial. So if that PD process weren't undertaken, conceivably option number 2 would be available. So that would be a general plan amendment, rezoning, local coastal plan amendment. It's a very extensive process. It's like the entire suite of developer.
I'm very familiar with it.
Entitlement for very, lengthy and with an uncertain outcome of.
Exactly, so I'm saying that's taking a risk as well.
Right.
And so the 2 options available both have risk for them.
That's
Okay.
correct.
So it's, yeah, okay. Okay, I'll let other folks have their questions and then.
Commissioner Gordon.
Do we have access, or has there been a aggregation of unit types among projects that have been approved within the city in terms of size of units and quantity that we have access to?
Hello, Commissioners. Lee Butler, Director of Planning and Community Development. We do have a running total of the projects. And I think what's actually more relevant is those that have been built or that are under construction. As this commission knows, there have been quite a few projects that we have entitled that unfortunately have not been built. And so we are keeping track of that in some respects. For example, the last 5 or so projects downtown, there's roughly 850 square foot average. And if I recall correctly, that includes not just the unit, but the corridors and such as well.
Mm-hmm.
So throughout the city, we have that information. We haven't totaled it. I'm sure that some developers are looking at that. But we also—
if I was a developer, I'd want that data.
Right. Yeah, so we've got that information available. It can be pulled from the website. And we have looked at it in some cases for our analysis as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen it aggregated in one specific location of this is how many 250 square foot 1 bedrooms, but I do know that we have seen a lot of projects with very similar, to this project in terms of design. And so I guess I'm wondering, given that this is discretionary, as a city, and because this is supposed to be a project that is supposed to enhance the community, which therefore would mean that the use of this would be something that we can feel confident would really benefit the community. I'm looking for that data. I'm looking to say, yes, I understand that they haven't all been built, but they could be. And they will be built to the plans that we've approved thus far. So I was curious if we had that data handy. But maybe the developer knows the answer to that.
Well, Sounds like we have it, we just don't have it right now for us.
Right, and yeah, we have compiled it in areas like the downtown. We have not compiled it in, what has been proposed or what has been built and what has been approved on the west side versus the east side and so forth. But all that information is available. We've got it on our website. And yes, I would say, there has been a greater, a larger percentage of new development has skewed towards smaller residences. And I think there are multiple factors associated with that. The demographic trends with households getting smaller, with people marrying later, with people deferring having children until later in life, and also choosing not to have children. All of those are factors in the desire for smaller households, as well as just the existing housing stock that we have here. You look at our zoning map, for example, and there's quite a lot of yellow, single-family detached, and those are typically the larger residences. And so the demand that the developers have seen has been for smaller units. But that's not entirely the issue. There are also instances where our policies actually encourage those things. And so with SROs, for example, or flexible density units, they do allow for a greater number of units than would otherwise be the case for the larger units. And that's some of the things that we will be looking at in the coming years, is how we might be able to actually allow for increased numbers of 2 bedrooms, for example. Like you can build 30 dwelling units per acre in the medium density residential general plan designation if you're building 2-bedroom plus units. But if you're building 1-bedrooms and studios, you've got to stick to, or you can go up to the 37 and a half or so dwelling units per acre. And so some of our policies actually incentivize those smaller units. And that's some of the things that we, as the staff and as the commission, will be contemplating in the coming years, is how we might want to modify some of those things. So it doesn't matter if it's 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. You could go up to 37 and a half dwelling units per acre, whereas right now, some of those policies actually incentivize the smaller units. Probably more than you wanted to hear, but all of that, I think, is relevant to where I think you were heading with that question.
The information that's available on the website, is that just units, or does it actually currently break down each unit? Like there's been 1,000 studios that have been approved, and like I think I've seen it as per unit, but not necessarily per size. So does that exist on the website?
We have the project plans on the website. We haven't done the breakdown of like you were saying, that itself isn't posted, that analysis isn't posted. Like I said, we have that information for the downtown, and we've looked at that through the downtown plan expansion, but not for the other, not throughout the entire city. So, you would need to mine that data, right? You would need to
AI will, got
yes,
it.
Or AI, yes.
I'd like to jump in.
Commissioner Thompson.
I think one of the crucial elements of where we're at with the application right now is the notion of using the plan development process for kind of using that as the tool to get to the finish line. And the plan development process actually came in this city about because of exactly this kind of notion that without some flexibility, you don't get the small units. The first plan development project that Thatcher and Thompson was involved in was over in Seabright, and there were single-family houses that had a 400 square foot rental unit. We didn't know what to call it. As a matter of fact, we didn't really even talk about it very much because it was going to be hard for folks to understand that a block from the beach with a big, beautiful 3-story house, you would want to have a 400 square foot unit on the ground floor. But the developer understood it, and the city accepted it because we could do it with a plan development. It was essentially, instead of 4 houses, it was 4 duplexes, which was kind of the technical way of thinking about it at the time. But the notion was that there was, it was useful for the city to have a administrative procedure that allowed you to do something that was a little outside the box, like having small units. And when we started to do the SROs, those were all done as plan developments, even the small ones, because it was the administrative technique that allowed you to make things the right size. And the notion that we need small units is, this was something that I was talking to folks, almost 10 years ago, that the Santa Cruzans, 40% of the households were single people. And we didn't have 40% of our housing for single people, mind you, which was a problem for affordability, because single people had to either take in roommates or find some solution to it. So the notion that this project could actually respond to housing needs in a flexible, creative way, and I think that's what Mr. Premack was talking about. I would like to see us put as few barriers to the tenant, the size of the units as possible. Let them come back in the plan development process with their recommendation of the right kind of community mix, and I think that that's a good place to start. I have a couple of other things to say about the site and the plan that just haven't come up yet. One of them is that the right-of-way for the rail trail is really wide where this site is. In fact, the site itself is set back about 30 to 40 feet from the railroad tracks. So there's a bunch of open space out here. I would hope that the next time we see site plans for this project, it actually includes the context, because the context is really important. This is not a residential neighborhood right here. This is been an industrial neighborhood. So we should have an appropriate way of transitioning from Safeway to the adjoining neighborhood, and this building should fulfill that function and should be able to show us that this is a good way to transition from Safeway to a single-family neighborhood. I'm not sure this is the right solution, but I think that's part of what we would want to see. I mean, one of the best things about the plan development ordinance is that it begs those questions. It says, so, okay, we get the big idea. Now, how are we going to deliver on something that creates a healthy neighborhood? And I think that Mr. Premack pointed out that the relationship to the street, shall we say, that's at the pub there, where the sidewalk is about 5 feet wide, and it's not a really successful situation. Here, there's a chance to do it right, and I think we ought to be confident that it's possible to do it well. So there have been a number of the staff's made, I think, a number of useful suggestions in terms of things that need to be addressed better. I think one of the weakest links in this really is the non-residential component. I think that that's worth some new thinking, because it's hard for me to picture how this would be successful on the commercial side. I think that's the weakest part of it. And because of its current zoning, we should take that real seriously. That's my first part. So I'm looking forward to see it come back as a plan development, because I think there's a lot of potential.
Okay, any other,
I do have more questions that have come up. If we recommend that this go to council, I mean, I understand that it's still under design, but if we don't make, I mean, would we need to be making recommendations on scale of this project at this point? Or if we, because I hear Matthew saying, or Commissioner Thompson saying that, you know, we have to trust that it will come back again, you know, as a more developed design, but I don't know that we can really trust that. And so I guess I'm wondering how granular do we need to get in these recommendations at this point?
So great question, Commissioner Gordon, thank you. So basically, it's being proposed as a project concept at this point. There are preliminary plans, and you're more than welcome to provide whatever suggestions for recommendation of the City Council that you like. And so, you know, staff have certain recommendations for revisions that we think could allow for support of the plan development concept. The Commission's welcome to make additional recommendations as it would seem fit.
Thank you.
And I'll add to that in terms of your comment about scale. And this might also be clarification for the public also. So SB 330 is a separate legislation than the density bonus state law. So even though this project would not be subject to like the vested features of SB 330, they could still choose to propose to use density bonus as part of their project. So that would come with incentives, concessions, and waivers that would allow for variations to development standards also.
So we could suggest things, but they can ask for concessions too, as we've normally had in these projects.
Yeah, it would function in a similar way, but.
So it's discretionary with an asterisk. No, I appreciate it. It's helpful for me to understand. I didn't quite understand that myself, so.
No, as I understand, sorry.
No, go ahead.
As I understand it, yeah, the density bonus law is really what there is to grapple with, and then sort of the multifamily standards and things like that aren't really applying here, but at the same time, with the density bonus situation, we could, you know, make changes here and there, and they could just kind of wipe it all out, is my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong, but with concessions and waivers and incentives and things like that, correct?
Right.
Okay.
I had a comment on the other, but I'm happy to respond to that question as well. So there is, I like the way that Commissioner Dan put it, it's discretionary with an asterisk, right? You know, as we proceed through this process, the density bonus does afford some allowances, and it will continue to be a discretionary process. And so the plan development permit by itself, you know, it does not have the mandatory approval requirements that you would have with another, you know, SB 330 project that's consistent. And that's why I think, getting back to Commissioner Gordon's question, you may not have another opportunity to, let's assume this gets a recommendation. Well, we're going to bring it to the council regardless, right, for their consideration. But let's assume for a moment that the council says, yes, proceed. The applicant has indicated willingness to do a fair amount of redesign, including, you know, addressing the street and the pedestrian environment there and so forth. If you all have comments related to, especially, you know, larger picture comments, then we would absolutely encourage you to convey those at this point, because the design, should it move forward, the design will occur likely before this project comes back to the Planning Commission again. And so this is not only affording you an opportunity to comment on the process, but also on specifics related to the project that you might want to see incorporated. So to directly answer that question, I would encourage and welcome any feedback that the Commission has related to the specifics of the project, and that will help inform how we work with the applicants moving forward should the council give us direction to proceed down the plan development permit path.
And that was going to be one of my questions is, are we going to see this again? And most likely, it sounds like.
If
If
we
we moved
get-
forward,
if-
assuming
Yes, if there is direction from the council to proceed, part of the reason why we're going through this process is because it's quite expensive to bring a full application forward. It's very easily hundreds of thousands of dollars to put together the environmental work and all the plan revisions. And there is, with this being a discretionary process, working with the applicant, we allowed them the opportunity to essentially make their case before the Planning Commission and Council before making that significant investment, right? That's why you don't see the plans revised in response to the comments that we've received, because even that is a substantial monetary investment, much less going through the California Environmental Quality Act process and all of that analysis. So this is offering that opportunity for them to get that initial feedback, see if they want to move forward in advance of committing all those resources.
Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. So I actually wanted to talk about the council policy on industrial zone properties. I mean, that's something that we haven't really touched on yet, but I feel is like the elephant in the room. I have, I have a lot of suggestions and comments. If this were to move forward as a PUD, and it's kind of exciting to be able to weigh in like the olden days. But I keep coming back to the policy that the council adopted, which is pretty unusual to do for, like, you have an existing policy related to the zoning, and the council took it up and created this policy document clearly stating what their intent was. So I'm thinking about this as a PUD, but then, I keep coming back to this policy that's very clear. The first bullet point says live-work units are the only type of residential use that is allowed. And then you move on in the policy, and there is a really small carve-out, and I think it even says in the rare circumstances, you can have some other residential uses, but for blah, blah, blah. And so I understand that staff is suggesting that we can add a few live-work and it satisfies this policy, but I'm really not convinced that that meets what's stated here in this policy. And I think that that's worth an explanation, because I just, reading the policy it seems very clear. The intent seems clear. And my first question when I read the staff report, and then I read this policy, and I went back to the question posed to the commission: should a multifamily industrial residential mixed-use development incorporating a residential use without live-work units be supported on the subject site, blah, blah, blah. And then rereading the policy, and it just seems pretty clear what the intent is. And so that's what I'm here struggling with. It seems like the city council carved out an intent here, and it seems like we should abide by that intent.
Great.
Thanks for that question. That is an important consideration. And the second page, actually, this paragraph where Tim has the screen share, there are some provisions in here that the commission could use to find the project consistency with the policy. In particular, I'll read a couple of parts of that. So sites on the periphery of industrial lands that are separated from other industrial uses and that transition between commercial/industrial and residential areas could potentially be considered for such residential uses through a plan development permit, but only in very limited circumstances when a broader set of general plan policy objectives would support such uses, and when greater public benefit is provided as part of the plan development permit.
Exactly. And so that's the caveat. So we can do this if there's a lot of public benefit. That's not here. Like, we don't have that public benefit yet with the current design. So it could be that, you know, what comes back does afford the community a lot of public benefit. We reduce the stories and the massing, add parking, maybe a little bit more open space, all sorts of things I could see being public amenities in addition to what's already in the proposed plan. But I don't know that, and you know, a trust us scenario isn't something, you know, I think, well, I'll just speak for myself. I'm not particularly comfortable with. I'm a trust but verify kind of gal. So how do we get there?
I think that's exactly what we were asking of the commission when we said, please provide us those comments. So, you know, if you have.
But what, I'm sorry, go ahead, sorry.
If you have those, you know, you listed off a few there, be interested to see what the other commission feels about those and other comments, because that's the feedback that is going to be built into what would ultimately make not just an ability to find consistency with the policy here, but also an ability to find consistency with the plan development permit findings.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim had gone over those at the beginning.
I just wanted to clarify that you're not acting on this project right now. Like, you're not, you know, approving it. You're not going to be stuck with it. This will come back to you again. It's just an opportunity to provide feedback.
And thank goodness we're not the final arbiter. This will go to the city council, just so everyone in the public understands the process. So.
And I think that this is a good opportunity to be slightly more granular. I think that, you know, giving good direction, not just to our planning staff, but also to our applicant about what we want to see in terms of public benefit. Because I agree that I think that right now, we're not quite there yet on the public benefit piece, but I think that it very easily could be. And I think, I mean, the way I'm looking at this is that right across the street, there's going in, you know, a 3-story affordable apartment complex, and then across the street is going to be this and the parish and things like this. And I think Commissioner Thompson brings up some good points on sort of, you know, this isn't exactly scaling down into the residential neighborhood, but it's a transitory space. And so I think that, you know, what goes here in our subject site and across the street is going to be super important in terms of how we transition sort of out of this, you know, quasi-industrial zone into our residential neighborhoods. Because at the end of the day, our kind of our plan here and what we did is we wanted to protect residential neighborhoods from huge developments that were super out of character. And I think that we have Mission Street here, and this is an arterial street. And, you know, I wasn't going to talk about Mission Street, but like, you should just avoid it generally. I do. And I'm a 40-year West Side resident. You know, this is going right in my backyard. And I'd rather do a lot of things than drive on Mission Street, like ride my bike on the rail trail. So that's another opportunity here. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of possibilities. And I think it is kind of in, you know, should we say, yes, this is something that we could live with given certain changes are made. I think that kind of puts the ball back into the applicant's, you know, park to come up with something better. And so I feel you on the, I'm not, I'm more of a trust but verify kind of person too, but I also think that this is like a very unique circumstance, and it could be really great as well. Sorry, I just kind of went ahead with comments. I do have a question really quick about the live-work situation. As proposed right now, none of these units are live-work, correct?
Correct, yes.
And should we say, hey, maybe some of these could be live-work, is that a possibility with this type of zoning and in this type of district?
Sure, it's certainly, yeah, it's anticipated by the general plan, Larry's description.
Okay. And should that happen, in terms of being for rent and for sale, I'm thinking about like the Venus parking lot, you know, they have those sort of like work-live units, and those are all for sale units, right? Are they?
Yes. They're all for sale as far as I've seen.
I'm pretty sure they're all for sale. But of course, that is catering to, I think, a completely different demographic of people rather than single people. And, that's going to be for people who have a business and are maybe looking to live where they work, right? And so that's just a completely different case. And so, yeah, I guess we're kind of in the Wild West here. We have just like so many options. Anyways, those would be my comments at this point. I think that there's a lot of good that could happen here. And I do have some, I can't make motions, but I do have some ideas that I think could potentially give the applicant a little bit more direction on what we'd like to see in terms of public benefit, specifically along the streetscape, and then also the sort of traffic calming, because this is such an interesting area with the rail trail, and the sidewalk kind of jogs and does some weird stuff, and there's semis coming in and out of here, and there's just, I think, a lot of consideration. So those would be my comments at this time. So if anybody else wants to jump in, yeah, Commissioner McKelvey.
So my understanding is the PER 2 overlay was partially created in recognition of the fact that industrial uses were not homing themselves in the area where it's been created. There was not the demand for strictly industrial uses, and so they created a use area that was meant to provide some other opportunities, some more flexibility, and, I realize that this proposal technically falls outside some of those, some of the components that are in the PER 2, but at this point in our community, I consider housing to be a public benefit. And I realize that, I can't thank the staff enough for bringing up all of these points, because they're exactly the things that I care about, and that if a project doesn't have, a peopled front to it, I some of the projects like the hotel at the end of Mission Street, where it's just kind of a wall, I think that is the worst thing that we can do to our community, is to not have people and active frontages on public, heavily populated public avenues. So I would really love to see revisions that place an emphasis on activating the street fronts. When I saw that, as I said, when I saw the wall with the garage door and the, I don't even know what the finish would be, but it's acres of blank wall, that just makes my blood run cold. I have heard comments from people about the loss of on-street parking. I'm presuming that I realize that, we have some limitations on imposing those requirements, but I think that bears some significant study. Traffic mitigation is obviously something that has to be addressed. The aesthetics of the building, there's not very much variation. I understand that it's kind of trying to take an industrial aesthetic, but it's, that, I don't know, it looks like an airstrip on that gabled roof that just runs on and on. I'd love to see some of those things made a little more interesting. The walkability, I think that with the rail trail, seeing the fence that's here by the sign on the upper left image, that is also something that I just really want to see opened up. I realize there are lots of legal issues regarding connections between the rail trail right-of-way and private property, but love to see some of that addressed. I'd like to point out that there are 18 affordable units in this proposal, and I think that those are always important. And I think that if there was some way to massage the connection to the rail trail, that would increase the public benefit aspect of the project as well. So the applicant talked about the fact that this is an underutilized parcel, and I think that is endemic to a lot of industrial land on the west side at this point. So I would like to see something inhabited again.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Vice Chair?
I've got more.
Oh, Commissioner Gordon. Okay, come on back.
I also want to reiterate, thank you for all the recommendations. Some of them seem obvious, like the electrical box on the street front, and these are the things that make me concerned about the whole trust us thing. Like, I appreciate that Mark Premack is involved in this project, and respect your views on urbanism and a healthy community. But some of the plan unit development, or the requirements that we took from the report is plan development permits will be issued only where the subject parcel is large enough to make innovative and creative site planning possible. And I just don't feel like we've pushed the envelope for the creative use of this parcel. So I appreciate that the planning department is pushing to remove that wall and create a little bit more integration. I agree that standalone commercial building could be more engaging and more curated to be a community benefit. The number two is the applicants for plan development permits have the professional capability to produce a creative plan. This one's a little subjective, but the reality is that we've seen a lot of projects come across from Workbench, but we haven't actually seen anything built. And I know, Mark, you have done many things in this community, including the Delaware project. But that also has taken 25 years to be successful, and we've had to make some compromises in how to activate that property. So number two is there's a risk there for the community, not just for the developer. Number three, the public's interest in achieving goals stated in the general plan will be served more fully through the plan development process than through application of conventional zoning regulations. So I do agree that this is a better activation for this than what it has been, but I think we need to continue to push that by really looking at the commercial aspect and the industrial aspect of this and how it serves the community. And I know that the planning department has mentioned that and created some specific recommendations. I would like to take it further and say that the commercial use in the lower right corner, which I guess is probably the north, it's shown in the rendering, that's the Almar Street facing that people are in a cafe or seating something, but when I look at the plan, it's got this long corridor and like this area where you're looking down, I guess, on the first floor, and I'm just, like, that's just not gonna be a functional commercial space. So, I would really like to make sure that the commercial and industrial space is not just an afterthought in this. And that is not saying that we can predict what's going to go there. I know that being that I'm in this industry, like, we can't predict what's going to go in these spaces, but what we can do is create spaces that we can easily see becoming food service or becoming, subdivided into smaller, more community-oriented retail and commercial and working spaces like we see on the west side currently. And, having worked at 719 Swift for the last decade, those spaces have transitioned, and the demographic that's moving into those buildings are a testament to what is needed over there on the west, or is wanted on the west side. So number four, the advantages to landowners afforded by the plan development process will be balanced by the public benefit. And in this particular plan, I'm seeing a huge benefit to the landowner in housing and revenue, and the balance of the community benefit seems out of scale. So I'd like, again, more support for industrial and commercial. And natural or man-made features and resources of the site, such as typography, trees, watercourses, and the like, are preserved. And again, that supports the staff's recommendation to remove that wall and integrate better with the rail trail. And utilize that space to do the transition that we're all in support of, I think, between the neighborhood and the industrial. So those are I have some other comments. The others more specifically is that there's a huge bike parking area in this. And I think it's really important, and this is more to staff, that we start working on some specific best practices or municipal code regarding electric bike storage in those, because it's been a topic that's come up in our projects, and the fire marshals they're trying to wrap their head around what's safe and best practices. So it's a huge part of every project that we're seeing, and of this scale, there's some real life safety issues. So I think that it's time for us to really dig in and look at some municipal code things regarding that. Go ahead. Do you have something? Oh, okay.
No, Commissioner McKelvey, and I agree. I have nowhere to park my e-bike, so I love that comment, yes.
So I can't, sorry. I do want to talk about the storage situation that's on these plans. It says that their intent is to turn these into ADUs. I think it said 20 in the plans. Well, in the plans that we got in the project description, it does say that. So, but that was what was in our packet, so I'm just responding to that. So if that storage is really truly going to be storage, or if we're turning into housing, I don't know what we're doing with that. I guess I would like some explanation, but I also would have a recommendation that there's storage is probably needed, but looking at storage 12 and 13 across from that commercial space on the second story would make that staircase, which is very prominent, much more purposeful in this design versus going up the stairs and having storage to the right, which I think was intentionally there to turn it into housing originally. So, yeah, go ahead, Mark. Did you want to?
I think that, the Delaware Addition, I did the master plan for the Delaware Addition. That project had, it had work-live apartments on the 4th and 5th floor of buildings. The notion is that, people work on a laptop. So how do we define work? So it was a planned development, but we still call them work-live. The staff was responding to an ordinance that spoke specifically to work-live that's primarily ground floor. We're not talking about that in a planned development. We're talking about other forms of housing. And so the storage areas were also the SB 330. They're a remnant from that. So we're not. Got it. So we're going.
So these are not. This storage is not turning into ADUs.
It'll be very straightforward with what we're going to be doing on the PD. Yeah.
Okay. I think that is all of my, well, I guess I do, if we're gonna get granular, some of the, there's some private terraces that are listed on the plans, but there's no way to access them. There's no doors, and I understand that this is still a design and process, but I guess it wasn't clear if those were just emergency access out those windows. And then,
if I could answer that, there are public rooftop areas. We're not anticipating private decks for the units, at least in that design.
okay, on the second, right, on this, I mean, it shows it on this floor plan, any one of these. I think there's, yeah, this keynote right here, which I looked at I think it's keynote 14. It says private terrace, but then when you look at the floor plan, there's actually no access to the terrace itself. So it's up in the upper part of the plan, yeah, right there. So all of those are noted as private terraces, and in the rendering it shows that, but there's no, it's unclear So the final thing in the renderings, I don't know if you can pull those up quickly, is that near the lobby, there's a rendering that shows a lot of people congregating in that space near the staircase. Not that one. Down in the row a little, just adjacent to the lobby. And, you know, we often see renderings that are misleading. And so this, no, yeah, it's page, yeah, I didn't write the page number down. It's near the lobby in the plan. It's like where that upper walkway, or maybe, oh, zoom in this lower right one here. Oh yeah, lower right, sorry. So in that space right there, there's not really anything there to really justify activating that space as the rendering says. And so I guess my other comment would be, let's see some realistic renderings. Let's see some real, genuine, activated spaces that are justified. And let's not put green walls in that we know are not gonna live and look like that. Let's look at renderings for this next iteration of something that's actually gonna be, so that the community has an idea of what they're really gonna see in the end. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Kelly.
I'm actually ready to call the question at this point. I think everyone's been able to share.
Motion to call the question? Is there a second?
There has to be a second first.
Second.
Okay, motion to call the,
Discussion first, I believe.
sure. Motion to call the question has been seconded. Is there discussion?
I actually had some suggestions and further comments to make, so I actually wasn't quite ready to vote yet, though there's a motion been made, so now we have a vote.
Any other discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Dan?
No?
McKelvey?
Aye.
Thompson?
Aye.
Alhamis?
No. So that motion passes and the question has been called. Do we have a motion?
Take a stab at it. I think that, that this has been useful because we've got to hear from the applicant, but we've also had a chance to talk about it amongst ourselves. But I think it would be very useful for it to come back to us still at a fairly conceptual level, because I think there are some serious questions that have been raised by the commission tonight, but we've also heard a lot of good intentions on the part of the applicant that would be a lot easier for us to understand with some graphics. And I think they can be diagrammatic graphics, because I don't think this is so much about the aesthetic outcome as it is about how this is really going to be integrated to the site and the neighborhood. For instance, would love to see more of what happens literally at street level. The building is set back from the street substantially, but the drawings don't really let us know how that space is going to be used. And it's in sharp contrast to, for instance, what happens at the little pub that's up the street. So I think that it would be a lot easier for us to do our work as a commission with some illustrations that spoke specifically to what we've had to share this evening. Especially now that we don't need to call the small units storage spaces anymore. If there are going to be units, let's see them. I think that the small units are a very important component in this project. So it'd be useful to
I think
see
when,
that.
you know, we should have a parliamentarian here because I believe when someone makes a motion to call the question, I don't know if you knew this, but that means all discussion ends and you must vote immediately. That's why it's rarely used, because it cuts off the opportunity for someone like Commissioner Thompson to expand on, which I actually had, it was a pleasure to hear your suggestion.
I would
but
just
I
suggest
believe-
that.
Here's the problem, we have 4 different options on the table.
Yeah,
So
so-
we need to pick one of those options with a motion and then second it and then move forward.
Yes.
Or we can also, I believe, continue the item, can we not? Or table it to a time certain in the future. So there's really all kinds of different options here.
Does Commissioner Thompson want to continue your motion, or?
I'll
I wish
withdraw.
we had a parliamentarian, because I do think we're
You're
in
correct.
uncharted territory here when you call the question. I believe it has to be done immediately.
You are correct.
Thank you. So we're under the gun here. You
Oh.
made a motion to call the question. Now the question must be called.
Okay, so I'm willing to move to the next motion, which is to go with the first option, which is staff recommendation, to see who is in favor.
Okay, so a motion on the floor by Commissioner Kelly with option number 1, as I understand it?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Staff recommendation.
Motion dies for lack of a second. Do we have another motion?
Could I have a point of information?
Sorry,
We're in
this
the
is-
process
yeah,
of
we-
deliberating and trying to decide on this. So I would be happy to hear what you're going to say, and that would also allow the rest of us to add our comments.
So keep up the motion that we had up there, the first motion. I'm not sure that's not a, that isn't
Tim,
what
can we
we
have the
mean.
options up there again?
Yeah, if we can.
Sure.
Yeah, and to clarify, Tim and I are taking notes on these, the feedback that we're receiving. And so I think what we were thinking is we could put that up on the screen so you can see sort of this list of different recommendations that you're making that you would want to include as feedback in your motion. If you want to add that to the
whatever the
recommendations that
motion
we already
is.
have, or if you want to
Yeah.
change anything.
That's super helpful. And can I ask one other procedural? No, that's fine. That's perfect. Thank you.
Can we have those?
I was just, so just procedurally, this is a recommendation we're making to the council. So this is really a council decision whether or not to move forward or not.
Correct.
We're not the final ones to decide who to move forward. So, I mean, I as much as I would appreciate to come back, I think we might as well, for the benefit of the applicant, get it to the council so that they can have some certainty one way or the other what's happening. It's up to the chair.
We're going to deliberate and we,
Have those, the things
Yeah,
that
can we
you
have those
had there
options up
before,
here right
the
now?
options, there we go, thank you.
Oh, of the recommendations by staff. I can present those.
Yeah,
That's
I
helpful.
think they should probably write up the feedback that we've gotten so far from Commissioner Gordon.
so
Oh,
yeah,
oh, I
but
see.
we've had a motion for option 1 that died for lack of a second. Is there another motion that someone would like to make? So we can, if, for example, what I hear Commissioner Thompson saying is defer judgment. If we defer judgment on that, does it not move on to the council?
You would be recommending to the city council that they defer judgment on the project.
Correct.
You would essentially be making that recommendation to the city council, but we have already received feedback from some of the commissioners that if you want to pass that along, I guess we could provide this feedback to the applicants and to the city council, but the formal recommendation would be to defer judgment.
So I was going to say this earlier during the staff presentation, but I didn't want to be picky. So under number 1, there could be a 1A, which is direct the applicant to proceed with staff recommended revisions and suggestions by the commission, et cetera. So that's another option for someone to make if they chose to make that motion.
We got options with an asterisk tonight. We can pass on options with an asterisk, can we not? And say, option 1, these are our recommendations, and by the way, here's our asterisk, and that we need to see more before
Yes.
we make an educated decision about not only the process, but the individual permit. That's another way to do it.
I'll make a move to make that motion to do option 1 with staff recommendation and any recommendations from the commission.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Kelly, seconded by Commissioner Thompson. And just to be clear, to direct the applicant to proceed with the requested plan development permit with staff recommended revisions as described. And what was the last part, just so we capture this in the motion?
As well as the commission recommendations that were expressed tonight.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. It has been seconded, and the clerk will call the roll.
Well, couldn't we just have a discussion?
I don't think we
first?
can because the question got called, correct?
No, that happened.
To make a
And now this
motion.
was just a normal motion
Okay.
with which there's been a second, and now
Sure.
you can discuss.
Sure.
So I just wanted to say, in addition to, I support everything that Commissioner Gordon said and the suggestions that she had for a better design of the project. I support all of those. I would also add to that, to add parking to the project. I think we should have at least half the number of spaces as units. I'm not even suggesting one parking spot per unit, but I think we need to deal with the parking situation. I agreed with what Commissioner Gordon said about the design. I think the design needs to be broken up a little bit. It's overbearing. It will just stick out like a sore thumb in the community. So I appreciate a redesign of that. I do think there should be some consideration for public benefit, since we need to have a public benefit in order to justify a PUD that the council should consider requiring a living wage or union labor. And I also would not like to see storage units. However, that being said, I do still think that this conflicts pretty clearly with the council's intended policy that they just made 6 months ago. And I think if there was a different project in front of us where I think it was clear that what the public benefit would be, I could get there. And, I really look forward to that coming back and seeing that. So I do appreciate the ability to see that in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I just want to make a note that adding parking to the project could potentially put you at risk for lawsuit under CEQA.
I'm not under this process because we have discretion.
I'd like to add a couple recommendations as well. To have street trees reflected in the redesign, and so that those are clear in terms of what's going to go there, what they're going to look like, how big they're going to be, so on and so forth. And then look into traffic calming measures for this particular area.
Those are good additions.
Such as bulb outs or, I'm not a traffic expert, but people go really fast. There's semis coming in and out of here. This needs to be done right. And we don't want to end up like, Water Street, where there's a driveway like every 10 feet and it becomes a super unsafe design issue.
Commissioner Gordon, would you like us to add I can take a stab at writing at saying the notes that I wrote down for your recommendations as well, or do you want to do that?
Oh, you can do it.
Okay.
Send it, I can email you right now, and you don't have to.
Okay. You do? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So, but, go ahead.
No.
Okay. So what I have Commissioner Gordon mentioned is suggestion for relocation of the transformer. Also, a better connection to the rail trail corridor. Also, a suggestion for improvement of the standalone building for enhanced community benefit.
said already though.
Okay, I don't know that yeah, you're right, those are, I think, probably in our staff recommendations. Also, let's see, enhancements to the industrial commercial interface along Almar, which I think is reflected in staff recommendation. Wants to ensure that industrial commercial space is not an afterthought, and in terms of successful conditions created for allowing businesses or industrial tenants to thrive. Let's see.
I mean, that
removal-
specifically was represented in that second floor plan, though. I mean, it's not a general recommendation. There is a dysfunctional commercial space currently designed in the project.
Okay, second, so improvement to second story, sorry. Second story, commercial space, fronting.
And Tim, I'm not sure if you caught it. I don't want to put words in Commissioner Dan's mouth, but I think with the living wage piece was local union labor.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Matt.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Okay, excellent, oops. Okay, and just want to capture all of Commissioner Gordon's comments. I have a note from Commissioner Gordon regarding just clarification about the intent of the conversion of storage space to ADUs. I think we might have captured that already.
Yeah, I think I think other people have mentioned the same thing, but specifically with storage 12 and 13, and the intentionality of commercial spaces is that there's a staircase going from the street up, and there's the dysfunctional commercial on the left, and then there's storage on the right, but it's a very grand staircase. And so my suggestion is that there's some intentionality to that corridor, essentially, or that module or whatever, what I would look at it as. And so that those uses support each other just in general. I mean, the whole project should be thinking in those terms versus just fitting it in, which feels a little bit like what happened.
Let's see, and I think, also suggestion about clarification on access to private terraces. And the desire for what I think were phrased as realistic renderings. I don't know if that's what was part of the recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, realistic is, sounds, well, I mean, I think it's just accurate.
Okay, accurate renderings. And also, just the mention of, I think along the same lines, if green walls aren't intended to be eventually included, probably don't include those in the renderings, so probably part of the accurate renderings. And for Commissioner Thompson, suggestion for return with diagrammatic graphics. I have also more information about what the design, kind of how the design interfaces with the street level. I have a note about the setback of the building from the street, and I think probably more information about the interface there, if I got that correct. And I think those are the substantive
I think
comments.
there was also one on e-bikes on safe storage.
Bike storage, okay. Guidance. Okay, okay.
And I think Commissioner McKelvey had variations in the gable roof line.
Okay. Okay. Variations.
Really
getting pretty small. Yeah, I'll expand it. Okay. All right, let's see what I can do here. It's still visible. Okay, that's probably a little bit better. Are there any?
Great job.
Okay.
Okay.
Happy to add any more or make revisions if this is not reflective of what was intended.
Okay, any other items? Okay, I believe, remind me, we have a motion and a second, correct? Yes. Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Gordon,
Aye.
Dan,
No.
McKelvey,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Alhamis.
Aye. That passes 6-1.
5-1?
Sorry, 5-1. Good
Chair
call.
Paul Hummus,
Doing the math
might
for
I
me.
just, one procedural clarification? I want to apologize. Neither staff nor I informed you at the beginning of this that it's our intention to come back with a phased plan development, come straight to the Planning Commission with a conceptual plan, which we will then discuss with you. So this process I appreciate you've attempted to guarantee that this process will happen, but it was always our intention that we would come to you with a phased plan development so that the conceptual plan for this would be fully discussed in public hearing with all of you. So,
Sure.
But thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Okay, and sorry, let me pull up my agenda here. I believe we have an informational item.
Yes, thank you. The informational item is to bring up the topic of potentially changing the Planning Commission start time. This was raised by a couple of the commissioners after the last meeting. It's something that would need to be agendized to have further discussion on, and so that is open for you to decide.
Well, maybe
Okay.
I should reveal myself as the
Vice
pointy
Chair
end
Dan.
of the spear here. So the suggestion was, and completely open, if this doesn't work for other commissioners, we'll stick to 7. But myself and another commissioner were wondering if whether 6 o'clock might be a time that's okay for everyone or better, but if it's not, again, it was just something to bring up, to discuss.
I'm not opposed to it personally. I just wonder if it would make it more difficult for members of the public to participate. Staff may have an opinion on that, I don't know, but I'm not against it personally.
So this item tonight is just to decide if you want to have the discussion, and then we will put it on an agenda and you can have a discussion about, benefits and other things.
And the ultimate decision would go to council though, correct?
The council would need to sign off on a change to the bylaws. Yes.
Correct, okay.
The library closes at 6, so that works in my favor.
We'll entertain a motion to put it on a future agenda.
Not on information items. We'll just bring it over to you.
Okay, sure.
Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, any other informational items?
I have updates, is that?
Updates are good too.
Okay. I'm gonna just give you some current planning updates, and then Director Butler will provide you with some of the long-range planning updates as well. So 530 Ocean Street, that is a 225-unit mixed-use building that was approved by the zoning administrator on March 5th. We did receive an appeal on that approval, and it is tentatively scheduled for this commission May 1st. 1305 East Cliff is an addition, remodel, and exterior improvements to the Natural History Museum. We did receive that application, and that will require Historic Planning Commission and Historic Preservation Commission and Planning Commission review. That has not been scheduled yet. It just came in, so it's still under review. We also received an application for 91 residential units above commercial at 901 Pacific Avenue. We had the community meeting on Tuesday. There was about 25 attendees, and we heard a variety of comments. So that one is going to be, that one's still under review as well. And then we also received another pre-application for a project at 201 Front Street. That is a 5-story building with 245 units. That one's also just a pre-application review, so we're just gonna be reviewing it for preliminary feedback. 201, yes. And then 313 Swift that you heard previously, I don't have the date, but that was approved by council on March 11th. That's the school teacher housing project. And then finally, 430 Meter Street, that is a project that currently includes 97 townhouses. We had that community meeting on March 10th. There were a lot of attendees at that meeting. And that includes a subdivision, so that will require eventually a recommendation by the Planning Commission with final approval by the City Council.
And one more time, what was on May 1st? I'm sorry, I got scattered.
May 1st would be the hearing of the appeal of 530 Ocean Street.
Hello again, Chair and Commissioners. A few additional updates beside the many that Samantha provided. At your next meeting on April the 3rd, we will be bringing an update to the city's objective standards. And so you all will recall we adopted those about 2 years ago, and in response to the feedback that we received from the community and how those have worked with the development community, we are bringing some modifications back. Coupled with that, we have a whole range of implementation items from our housing element. The objective standards are, of course, in our zoning ordinance, and the housing element also calls for a wide array of changes to our zoning ordinance as well. So we've paired those together. So that will be at your next meeting. We also will be presenting to you as an informational item our annual general plan and housing element report. That is actually published right now. It is going to the City Council on Tuesday, and so you can check that out. I will note that, as you all are well aware, our regional housing needs allocation targets, our RENA targets, went up by 5 times compared to what we had in the 5th cycle. And in the 6th cycle, you'll see in that report that we are on track to meet our 5 times numbers in the very low income and the low income categories, but not in the moderate income or the above moderate market rate categories. And that's reflected in what you see with many of the affordable housing projects moving forward and many of the market rate projects not being able to pencil and move forward in recent times. Let's see, you will continue to be busy in April. We have on April 17th coming before you, we are expecting to bring you the downtown plan expansion, including the environmental impact report for that. Coupled with that, we will be bringing the homeless garden project site on the far west side, Delaware and Schaefer. We will also be bringing the, and that is a general plan amendment and rezoning and local coastal program.
In the same meeting?
That is the same meeting. In fact, they have to be at the same meeting because, and we have another one. There's a third one at that, which is the May and Leonard. Technically they could go to different planning commissions. They have to go to the same council meeting because of the state's no net loss provisions. They have to be acted upon concurrently at the same meeting. So,
just saying, downtown expansion, homeless garden, I mean, that's gonna be a long meeting.
It will be.
Hopefully we can start at 6.
Sorry, man, sent the postcards.
Oh, darn.
Those are the primary updates. Samantha mentioned the next meeting. We're looking at May the 1st. You mentioned the 530 Ocean appeal for that. And I mentioned the Tuesday meeting with council. Did you mention 1930 Ocean Street Extension for council? So we are, if you think back a long time ago.
Those of us who are old don't have to think back.
If you think back some time ago, 1930 Ocean Street Extension was approved by the city council. It was appealed in the court of law. The early courts sided with the plaintiff. The appeal court, and in response to that, the council rescinded a small part of that approval, the narrow part that the court agreed with. That was subsequently appealed. The city prevailed in that appeal, but we need to reinstate the part that was mandated by the judge in the earlier ruling. So that's going forward. Just kind of an FYI to you all, you don't need to act upon that because you already acted upon it in, I believe that was 2019. So FYI, when you see that on the agenda, that is why. And I think that is all I will share for now. Obviously, there are a lot more things going on, but thank you all for your service, and we will continue to keep you all busy.
Thanks, Lee. Just really quickly, I did like a little cursory search through the Planning Commission bylaws. I don't see anything in there about motions to call the question.
It's parliamentarian,
It's
not the bylaws.
Part of our.
Oh, it's not part of the bylaws?
Our rules of.
Rules of order.
Order, yeah.
Like how to
Got
conduct
it.
a meeting. It's like a different kind of deal.
So
Right.
the easiest place to find that is
And I
if
found,
you
I
go.
found it in the council handbook.
Yes, the
and
council handbook
What the
is-
council handbook says is any council member, with the exception of the presiding officer, can make the motion to call the question. If adopted, the motion requires that all discussion of the item under consideration be halted immediately and that the item immediately be put to a vote.
Just what I said.
Is that?
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's what you did.
Didn't we just discuss a bunch after that? Because it's under the
Little
item?
Too much, but you know, that's okay. You got there
So
quick.
I'm just saying. Okay,
Next time you know.
all right.
No talking.
Okay, that's all the information from me. Yeah, good. Thanks, Lee. Okay, at this point, no subcommittee or advisory body oral reports, no items referred to a future agenda, so we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, guys.
Those pesky procedural rules.
I was like, I'm pretty sure we just got a vote.